makes this experience of having the Royal Scottish National Orchestra record your symphony significant to you?
This is one of the more prestigious orchestras in the world, and to be in Glasgow for the recording is just a great experience for the quality of the ensemble, for the scale of the recording, for the musicianship of this ensemble. It's really a privilege to have my music performed by such an organization, so I'm quite excited. I think it will be, they bring a very particular interpretive voice to this new music. So it's not simply executing the notes as they're written on the page. It's working between the notes. It's bridging all the gaps in what's on the page, which is just the architecture. And to fully clothe this work, it requires musicians of this skill. So they will drape and clothe this piece and render it in a way that's richer than whatever the parts that were input just during the compositional process.
What goes through your mind as you begin a new musical work?
I usually start with silence. Ask myself, what is it that breaks the silence? What is the first note or the first musical gesture or the first encounter with sound someone has on the palette of silence? We're in a noisy world, constantly our background. There's music all around us all the time. So it takes something to stop and to imagine nothing. What's that next something? That usually is the seed from which an entire piece will germinate and grow. And it is the experience of starting with a truly empty canvas. What is the first brush stroke? That's where I start. And it's not notes as ideas, it's usually some impression of a texture or quality of sound, maybe a motive, but it's not just the motive, it's fully orchestrated. So all the orchestral sounds come into my imagination right out of the gates. And like you would start a story and you meet your main character and then you follow that main character, those first bars of music become the musical story. And I follow them through the adventure from that moment.
Why did you decide to write a symphony?
Symphony is a milestone event for a composer. Since the symphonic form was invented by Haydn and improved and expanded through Mozart and Beethoven and throughout the 19th century and into the 20th century, it is the novel for a composer. It is the grand storytelling. And a symphony is more than just a long piece of music. You can write a long piece of music and it not be symphonic. But what makes a symphony is it's held together by a series of musical ideas that give it a unity of concept, a cohesion. And that cohesion may be literally the same melody occurring in several movements, as Dvorak does that. Beethoven gives us that in his Ninth Symphony, one of the earliest examples of that. Other symphonists had done the same thing. Tchaikovsky does it in some of his works. You get that unity of form. But the idea of a symphony is it's a large-scale, multi-movement work, like many acts of a play, that have one overarching aesthetic impulse to them. And so, why a symphony? It is the most substantial piece of music a composer, an orchestral composer, will create. And they tend to be very long. My symphony is 45 minutes, which is quite a lot of music for a single work. And it's bound together with one musical impulse, one set of concepts. And so that's true of this. It is a major milestone of serious compositional work for an orchestral composer. And it was time.
What makes a symphony a symphony?
Symphony, typically 4 movements. The 4 movements are contrasting in form and character. And what makes a symphony work is it's clearly for a large orchestra. So a symphony orchestra, a symphonic orchestra, has a certain kind of orchestration. So that would be large string section, paired winds, brass, percussion. Essentially, all of the instruments of the European classical tradition are brought onto the stage. And then the 4 movements, unlike, say, a dance suite, Nutcracker Suite would be an example, or Lieutenant Kije or Prokofiev, or lots of other examples, Stravinsky's Rite of Spring. These are orchestral works that are held together by some other narrative, or they are suites, they're photographs, they're snapshots on a tour. Symphony is a musical narrative. It's got a deep logic. There's a reason why the music unfolds the way it does. There's a structure to the way the musical storytelling and the musical thinking unfolds. And it tends to be a serious, a weighty work. It has a heft and a depth and a sophistication to it that lighter orchestral music like dance suites don't. They tend to be more overtly entertaining, more on the surface. What you hear is what you get. A symphony has layers. So it's a deep, serious work.
What is the significance behind this symphony?
This symphony stemmed from, in the wake of 2020, with all the lockdowns, the tearing apart of our human connections in our societies at scale. When we locked into our homes, we stayed close to our families, we interacted over remote telecommunications technologies, we did our work remotely, we avoided each other, we masked our faces to conceal ourselves behind what we thought was a protective barrier, which was in fact not as protective as everybody had hoped. And that subtraction of humanity left a lot of people wondering, where's our society going? Where are we going? Where is the future? This symphony grows out of that distress that not only were we in a time when there were lockdowns and isolation, we were in a time when there were riots, there were social breakdown, there were the stresses and strains of being disconnected from each other were manifesting at scale. The symphony, the first movement, grows out of that sense of uncertainty, that chaos, that being unmoored from things that were known. And it follows from that moment through a series of musical segments that ultimately culminate in an expression of hope. As a person of faith, for me, the finale is the transcendence, it's the transfiguration of that despair, of that hopelessness, that even though in our humanity we don't see the future, we never know what it is, and it will always evade our ability to predict it, it is still guaranteed by a creator, by God who made and loves his creation. And that comfort draws this symphony from its early moments of chaos and confusion through to its consummation at the end of one of transcendent hope. So it is a journey through the dark time of lockdowns, social breakdown, uncertainty of the future, and it rests itself again on something eternal.
You've had pieces recorded by the Budapest Film Orchestra and other orchestras in the past. What makes this experience different?
This is the largest ensemble I've ever worked with, a 70-person orchestra. The Royal Scottish National Orchestra is prestigious and comprised of outstanding Scottish musicians. British orchestras are very good studio ensembles. They provide a wonderful sound, rich, thoughtful, artistic, epic. This is truly a privilege to have my music performed by an ensemble of this quality of musician and at this scale, in this location, is truly a wonderful way for this symphonic work to find its birth, really. It's only ever existed in digital forms. So its first incarnation, as it is intended to be heard, will be here in Glasgow. And that is a thrilling prospect. And this is a fine orchestra, Budapest Orchestra, excellent players, wonderful musicians, smaller ensemble in some respects, a different sound. An Eastern European sound is not the same as a Western commercial sound. This is an orchestra that is fully steeped in large epic scale music.
You've had the opportunity to travel about Scotland for a week now. What are your thoughts on Scotland?
It's an inspiring country. No wonder so many musicians and artists and poets and writers have found their inspiration in the romantic highlands of Scotland, in the craggy corners, the sun-dappled light on a partly cloudy day in Edinburgh, the delights of a Scottish whiskey, the playfulness of the people in their own way. But this is a hard country too, a country of chiaroscuro, There's lots of shadow and light. There are strong contrasts between light and shade when you look in the locks and you see the water churning and boiling, and its deep, moody introspection. You see the light of the sky change, be brilliant blue one moment and overcast and misty the next. The full spectrum of the emotional palette just seems to be on display in the land itself. And the people of Scotland have been gracious and lovely, interesting, hospitable, warm in their way, and proud of who they are, their contributions to the world. It's been a delight.
What does this opportunity to have the Royal Scottish National Orchestra record your piece mean to you, both personally and professionally?
Personally, it is an opportunity for the work that I conceived of to be put into human hands. That's what a composer does. I create instructions. I create notes, dots on a page, and it's incomplete until people pick them up. So personally, it's a chance for me to hand my moments of inspiration into the hands of some extraordinary musicians, world-class musicians, who will take it and bring their voice to it, and they will fill it in. They will inflate it. Just as a human connection, as a composer, as one musician to another, I will now connect with these musicians in a very deep way, in a very personal way, more personal than words in many respects. These notes represent something I can't speak about any other way. So they will take into their care the trust of whatever it is that I have invested. That's personal. Professionally, the quality of the orchestra, world class, to have my music graced by their skill and expertise, the sound they'll bring, their musical instincts. That is truly the joy of a composer, is to see, or at least this composer, to see musicians take the work and truly bring it to life. It cannot live until it's made into vibrating air. That is what it is to compose, is to create vibrations in real space for humans to experience. Until that moment happens, it's an incomplete work. So professionally, to have this piece of artwork rendered in the hands of an orchestra of this caliber is just a great privilege for me. It's truly a joy. I'm very excited.